Hey everyone, good morning. It is good to be here again with you. If we haven't met, my name is Matthew. I'm from Atlanta, but I get to come up here a bunch, and it's always a gift to be here in Fargo. So thank you so much again for welcoming me. Boy, it's a rough start. We're gonna have to start this whole thing over. Thank you for letting me be here. Okay, so we're starting a series today, which you just saw, called Built to Last. And your lead pastor, Beth, and I are going to co-teach it through the month of August. And what we're going to do today is sort of kick it off with, I think, a really basic sort of foundational idea that I'm excited to talk to you about. But first of all, let's kind of back our way into it. One of the things that I learned a while ago that really changed my life was this idea that everything is spiritual. Like there's not like this part of my life that's like the meaningful, significant, spiritual, eternal part, and then the like everyday, run-of-the-mill, 9-to-5, daily grind sort of part. But that actually the whole life, every part of it is a moment in which God is present, God is there, everything is spiritual. And the reason why most of us tend to take our lives and sort of break it up into two categories is because of a guy named Plato, who you probably have heard of. And Plato was, of course, one of the three great Greek philosophers of ancient Greece. And one of the things that Plato taught was what is now called Platonic dualism, which is that essentially there are two realms in which we exist. There's the material everyday realm, and then there is the realm of like what he called perfect forms, the eternal realm. In other words, there's like the things like the visible and then the invisible. And the invisible is what really matters, and the visible is just sort of like, like it doesn't really matter. Like what's on your planner or your calendar for the day. It's like, appointments and stuff like that. The thing that really matters are these bigger sort of spiritual ideas. And this idea was picked up by guys like Rene Descartes during the Enlightenment, who has now impacted all of us because all of us in the West have been deeply formed by Enlightenment thinking. And so you and I just naturally, I think, we're born into this idea that like I have a part of my life that has deeply significant parts to it, and maybe that's like the spiritual part or the church part, or maybe it's like when I pray or if I do something like good for another person. And then there's just like the other little bits, like how I drive my car and like how many times a day I look at my phone and stuff like that. And that really isn't important, and this is the thing that goes on and on. But then I learned that Jesus didn't think that way at all about the world, and that was a really revolutionary thing for me to discover. And that actually the ancient Hebrew people, they didn't think about the world that way either. And the worldview of Jesus, out of which he was teaching and moving around Galilee and proclaiming the kingdom of God, was one that was infused with this idea that actually God is a part of everything. There's not like the spiritual part of my life and then the unspiritual part of my life, but that God is everywhere. In fact, the word for spirit in the Hebrew language is the word for breath and wind. So the material experience of God in the world, or the integration of my life as a whole, like both the everydayness and then like the extraordinariness, is actually as real as the air in my lungs right now or the wind in your face. The Hebrew people didn't even have a word for spiritual because they just understood that, in their own words, that the whole world was full of the glory of God, that God was everywhere. So we're in a series that we're going to kick off today called Built to Last, Habits That Hold. And it's this idea that our life is not like this bifurcated, whatever segment of variously detached activities, but actually all of our life is leading us in a direction, and that's because God's a part of the whole thing. So when we talk about habits, we're talking about the daily intentional and unintentional practices, patterns of behavior that are leading us somewhere, that are forming us somewhere. Every week we're going to come back to this verse by Jesus. It's from the Sermon on the Mount, and if you, even if you're like new to church or you've never been to church before, you are familiar with some of the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount. It's Jesus' most famous sermon and a lot of his most famous sayings. So for example, like go the extra mile, like Jesus came up with that, or love your enemies, something that we still don't really know how to do. He teaches in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, this unapologetic proclamation of an upside down version of the world that he would call the kingdom of God. And he basically is laying out, this is what it's like for people who are living in alignment with what God is like in the world, who are living in his kingdom. And then at the end of the sermon, just so that you and I wouldn't make the mistake and his disciples wouldn't make the mistake in the day of thinking that this had really all been pie in the sky teaching on Jesus' part. He didn't actually mean for us to do these things. You can't actually do them. Don't worry about it. Just so we wouldn't make the mistake of thinking that this was just the mutterings of a man with no grip on reality, he says these words at the very end of the sermon. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. Everyone, that is, it's open to everyone, to all of us, who puts these words that he hears into practice, meaning that Jesus intends us to listen to him and then to do it, like then to engage with his teaching and then to add it to the way we live our life. He says everyone who does this is like a person who's building his house, not on shifting sands, not on an unstable ground, but on a firm foundation on the rock. Now, I don't know like anything about building houses, but I'm going to talk about it for the next couple minutes. So when you build a house, the most important, and if you're an architect, please come and tell me afterwards and say, you are wrong, and I will say, I'm sorry, it's too late. But my understanding is that when you're building a house, the most significant, like cannot skimp on this, part of the building is laying the foundation. And you guys have here in Fargo just lots of new neighborhoods coming up, like lots of people moving here. And so you probably have driven by neighborhoods going up and houses being built. And it always strikes me when I drive by a house that's being built, how long it takes them to just get the ground ready, you know? Like it feels like half the process is just getting the ground ready and pouring the foundation. Once that's done, like things actually happen pretty quickly. Walls go up and the roof is on, electrical and plumbing and paint on the walls and light fixtures and doors and windows. It's like, oh, that's pretty quick. There's a house there all of a sudden. It's the getting the ground right, because if the foundation's off, it doesn't matter how pretty or nice or even how good the materials are. There's no skimping on it. It is the most important part. And if you've ever tried to buy a house and you have an inspection, you know, inspectors can come back and say lots of things. They can say, oh, there's a little bit of wood rot here that's going to need to be cleaned up. Your HVAC unit's only going to got 5 more years on it. You probably want to be aware of that. The roof is maybe a couple of years away from being replaced. Those things are all doable. But if they come back and they say there's a crack in the foundation, it's like, well, the deal's off. Because we all know that the most single and significant ingredient in the integrity of the structure of the house is whether or not the foundation is solid. And so Jesus' words here should come to us like in yellow highlighter. He's telling you and me how to have a life that is stable, that's resilient, that's able to endure the storms of life. Rains came, winds blew, but my house was built on you. He's telling you and me how to be the kinds of people who have grit and tenacity and can survive the very chaotic and hecticness of the world. And he's saying, walk in my ways, follow me, learn from me, and you will be a person whose house can endure a storm. So I want to begin with this big idea today that I think is going to just work its way through all 5 weeks, and then we'll get into a couple of specifics for just this week. But here's the big idea, maybe for the whole series. Habits have the power to shape us. Habits have the power to shape us, whether intentionally or unintentionally. How many times a day we look at our phone, the podcasts we listen to, the audiobooks, the music, the news, how aggressively we drive, what we do with our free time. These are all forming us. They're these unintentional things. Some of us have unintentional habits. Like I've been chewing my nails for 40 years. I think that's going to go with me to the grave. I think I'm going to be 80 years old chewing my nails for some weird reason while I watch, at that point, probably Jeopardy. Like there's something about it. It's what I do. But then we have like intentional habits, and probably all of you in here have things like that. Like I go for a run or go to the gym, or I walk the dogs, or I track how much water I'm drinking, or I read every night before I fall asleep, or whatever. I have my sleep routine and ritual. And these are all things that I've intentionally put into my life because I believe that by doing them, they're moving me in the direction of who I want to be, the kind of person I want to be, or the kind of health that I want to have, or whatever it is. But whether it's like a small little thing like how I drive or how many times a day I pick up my phone, or it's something more intentional like, you fill in the blank. all of these things are shaping us and forming us into who we are becoming. Annie Dillard famously says, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. And this is, again, pushing against that idea, that Platonic idea that there's like some things that really matter, and then there's all the rest of it, just the stuff that just like whatever, you just flush it at the end of the day, nothing really matters. And she's saying, no. We all know that this is true, that who we will be in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years is more determined, not by those major moments, but by the everyday, moment-by-moment decisions that we are making. Or C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite writers and thinkers, he says it this way. You may know him from the Chronicles of Narnia. He wrote a ton of books. He's a person well worth reading. But he says this, I believe this is from The Great Divorce. Every time you make a choice, actually, I think this is from Mere Christianity. Sorry, I'm just editing myself live. Every time you make a choice, you are turning the central part of you, the part of you that chooses, into something a little different than it was before. And over a lifetime, these choices slowly transform this central core either into a heavenly or a hellish creature. There's been a lot of, I think, thought in the church over the last couple of years about how all of life is spiritual, how God is actually part of all of it. My favorite book on this is a book by Tish Harris and Warren called Liturgy of the Ordinary. It's an absolutely amazing book. If you're new to Christianity, if you're just figuring stuff out, this is your first time here, this is probably not a book for you to go pick up. It might be a little bit, this might be a year down the road for you. Maybe you're just trying to get a sense of like, who is Jesus? What is the church? Why am I here? Why are we singing? And that's a good place to be. But if you've been walking with God for a little bit and you kind of have a sense like, I want something more, I want to know what's next, this is an incredible book because she talks about how folding laundry and bath time and making sandwiches and fighting with your spouse and drinking tea, all of these things are actually opportunities to recognize that God is there in the moment with you right there, that all of life is spiritual. And don't get weirded out by the word liturgy. I know that it's a word that we sort of think of and we immediately think of like stuffy churches with robes and stoles and smells and bells. And we're like, that's not my, if that's your thing, you're in the wrong room probably. It's like, this is not, but liturgy just means the work of the people. That's all it is. It's just the practices of the people or the habits, you could say. Every church has a liturgy. Prairie Heights has a liturgy. We have a way of doing things here. It's just different than maybe how the Lutheran church does it down the street. But the idea of this book is that every part of my life, from sitting in traffic to watching the Vikings game to closing a business deal, all of these things, this ordinary everyday life is an opportunity for me to recognize that God is there, that he's doing something in that moment, and he's doing it in me. I want to give a couple examples of how this works in my life. First, I have tried to develop over the last several years the practice of developing a posture of gratitude while I'm putting away groceries. And I know that can sound weird, but like I have 4 kids, 3 of them are teenagers. We eat a lot of food in this house. And there's just lots and lots of food. And the meal plan is robust. And I like to do the grocery shopping because I don't know, I like it. So I come home with all this food and then I got to figure out where it goes. And it's really easy in moments like that where you have more food than you have places to put it to just become grumpy about it. Like, why isn't anyone else eating leftovers? And why are there 4 things in here with half a piece of lasagna? And why am I the only one who ever clears this out? And why is my house so small when I work so hard? And like, whatever it is, like you just develop this sort of grumbling spirit. And so what I caught myself doing this years ago, especially because at that time I was out of work, I was in between jobs, and our church was being incredibly kind to us, and they brought over groceries and more than we had space for. And I took the moment to realize like God is saying like, you can be grateful right now. And so now as I'm trying to figure out where to put the broccoli crowns, which is the worst shaped vegetable, they take up so much space. Like as I'm trying to figure out where to put the broccoli crowns, I just say, thank you, God. Thank you so much that I have so much food, I don't know where it goes. And thank you for the people who picked this, who grew it. Thank you for the people who raised the chickens, who laid these eggs. And would you fill their fridge as full as you filled mine? Would you care for them as much as you care for me? And would you help me remember that your abundance towards me is meant to make me abundantly generous to people around me and not make me stingy? And let me not become one of those people who's constantly running from this like fear of scarcity, like there's not gonna be enough. And I tell you what, man, it's a game changer as you're figuring out where to put the Cheerios and everything. Like, God's asking me, like, be grateful, adopt a posture of gratitude. Another place where this shows up, and I'm not doing so good in this one. In fact, every one of these examples, I'm gonna get worse and worse. So I started out at the top and we're just going down. But when we drive cars, something happens to us. We lose our common humanity. We forget that all the other people behind all the other windshields are people too. We treat them like they're impediments to our route. They are competitors to our parking spots. And I don't know why this works, but there's something about that clear glass, it just cuts us off. Like we are no longer brothers. Like now you are my enemy. And so what I try to do when I'm driving, and I know you guys have traffic here, we have traffic in Atlanta, like we're kind of infamous for it. It's terrible, never come. But it's like I try to just remember that the people all around me zigzagging and like making me feel unsafe or whatever are just like me. They're just trying to go somewhere. And we don't know where they're trying to go. I don't know, but I can imagine that it's probably feels important like where I'm going. Probably feels like they're a little behind. Maybe it's a person who's going to their first day at a new job and they're nervous, and this isn't really where they saw themselves working in the first place, but now they're here and it's not quite the story they told for their life. Or maybe it's a person on their way to their doctor's appointment that they've been putting off for a long time because they're really afraid of the news they're gonna hear. Or it's someone like one of my teenage daughters and who's not doing a good job on the road and is well aware of it, doesn't need more feedback coming from other drivers that they actually are, a menace to society on the road. Or it could be a mom who's just exhausted. She was up all night with the colicky baby and she's got the 2 toddlers in the back and they just want the same Bluey song over and over and over again. And I tell you what, where is God in all of those scenarios? He's in those cars. He's as committed to those lives as he is to me. He knows them as intimately as he knows me. And if that's where God is, that's where my heart can be too. I can choose to develop a posture that sees the people around me as fellow humans, as people who are just like, I can do that thing that Jesus talked about where I love one another as you would have someone else love you. A third habit that I noticed in my life, which I'm not very good at, is how I have a hard time being bored for 5 seconds without picking up my phone. I feel for it. It's my Linus comfort blanket. I just like to know it's there. I don't even have to look at it. I just want to know it's there. If I'm ever in a waiting room, or if I am standing in line at a grocery store for 30 seconds, or if I'm at a red light, I'm not supposed to say that, but if I'm at a red light, just a quick, what's going on? Just a quick little dip into the other world. And those things aren't great, but what's even worse is when I'm in a room with other people and they're having a conversation and it's not really with me, but I'm still there and I know these people. Like maybe it's my wife and my daughter and they're talking about something and I'm not involved and I'm not that interested. I'll just leave the room mentally. I mean, I'll be sitting in the same spot, but it's essentially, I'm basically saying like, hey, I know that we're family. And I know that, I love you and I'm committed to you, but I'm gonna go look for some more interesting people on social media for a couple of minutes. Like I'm just gonna leave the room. Like that's a terrible thing. So how do we push against that tendency? Maybe it's just me, I don't think it is. We have now a tremendous amount of sociological data that's telling us that basically we as a society are addicted to the dopamine hit that comes from touching and looking at our phones now. It's like a real problem. And our kids are even worse in it. It's like it's a real problem. What do you do? How do you develop a habit that would push against this, that would shape me into a different kind of person? Well, it's pretty easy. You just put it somewhere else. It's like somewhere where you're not. Or when you go to bed, you put it on the other side of the room so it's not the last thing you look at anymore. Or when you get to the store, just leave it in the car and go in. And so you'll just be a guy in the store, just doing the shopping. Now I know you're like, but my lists are on the phone. Trust me, we did great for a long time without phones. People weren't coming back in the mid-90s going I bought nothing that I was supposed to. People wrote things down and we still managed pretty well. We did great before lists. We're gonna be okay. I'm talking about what are intentionally small ways that I can just push against this habit in me to always be escaping from the moment. How do I just be present? How do I just be present? And all of these things, what I think God is asking us, what we're being invited into, is to just take stock of our life and see where are the places where there's more for us. Like where we could be the sort of person we want to be more present, be more alert, be more compassionate to our neighbors. How could that happen? In the remaining time, I want to go over 2 practices that are going to have like a little bit of homework, which I feel, I've only been here like 5 times, so giving you homework feels, I don't know. I don't know who I think I am, but I'm going to give you a little bit of homework to try this week, because again, this is about real things, like us trying stuff and trying to work it into our life. And so first, I want to talk about a daily practice. We'll talk about a daily practice that grounds us in love. Now, if you're here and you're not a Christian, you can do this too. You'll just do a slightly different version of it, because really what this is about waking up and starting with what's most important. And that can be like thinking on it, meditating, journaling. There's lots of ways to do that. But I'm going to talk mostly about how like we would do it as Christians. So how do we put in our lives a daily practice that will ground us in love? Well, first of all, just a little bit of like caveat. It takes, according to scientists, 66 days on average to form a new habit. So nothing happens out of the gate. Nothing is going to happen in 1 week or 2 weeks or 4 days. And a lot of times when we try to build a new habit, we have a lot of energy up front and then we sort of pilfer out. And what we have to like recognize is like, that's totally normal. That's totally normal. Then you got to get yourself up, dust yourself off, and be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself. You're trying to build a new habit. You didn't get to where you are overnight. You're not going to get to where you want to be overnight. It's going to take some time. But how do we choose intentionally in our daily practices to, how I would say it, let God have the first word? Before Wordle, before Slack, before email, before the news, before Twitter, how do I let God be the first one speaking to me? Some of you have been doing this for years. You have a daily practice and it's beautiful. And if we could see today who you are today versus who you would have been if you had not been doing this for 10 or 15 years, we'd be like, my goodness, what a huge change that is. Or if we could see who you were when you started this and who you are today. But a lot of us in here, we have no regular practice, and that's okay, because we're all beginners and we're all learning together. So if you have no practice of putting God as a part of your morning routine, I just want to give you a couple of tools. One of the great things about our phones, this is maybe the saving part of it, is that there's a lot of really great resources you can use. And probably you already have some kind of a phone that you're using. So why don't we use it for good? These are some apps that are, I think, really exceptional. Glorify is the #1 devotional app in the country. All of them are pretty similar. There's like a little bit of Bible, a little bit of reflection, a little bit of prayer. It's just slowing you down, reminding you of what's most important, centering your thoughts on God, giving you something to mull on throughout the day, saying a little prayer. It's just grounding you in what's true. The larger story that you're a part of. So YouVersion is another, it's a really well-known Bible app. You may already have it, but it also has daily readings and devotionals. 2 of my favorites, Dwell and Praise You Go. Praise You Go is a little bit more like sort of old church, sort of, which isn't to say like to scare you away from it, but it's like at first you might be like, oh, this is different than I was expecting, but I really love both of them. I think Dwell is behind a paywall after a whatever free trial. But check one of these out this week. If you have no practice of this, check one of these out. Download one of them. If you like being outside, if you feel close to God, go for a walk. Walk the dog. Put earbuds in and go and spend time 8 minutes just reflecting. Or if go into a room in your house and make a cup of coffee and sit quietly. And I literally did this morning at the Courtyard Hotel. Like I put in earbuds, I drank not great coffee, and I sat and I reflected and prayed and meditated and listened to the Bible for a couple of minutes. It's just a way of starting. This is how I start my day. Or if you feel like I don't really want to do an app, I'd like to stay off my phone, I don't want the distraction, great. Open a Bible up to one of the stories about Jesus. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. These are the biographies of Jesus' life. And just take a little part of his teaching or a story about a miracle. Or go to the Psalms, which is like that big song book in the middle of the Bible. It's about 150 songs and poems written by people just like you, who are trying to make sense of what it means to be in a universe with an invisible God who's personal and yet so far removed and yet right here. And how do I make sense of my life when it's not working out the way I want it to? And where are you in all this? And real prayers made by real people trying to grasp what faith is. Sit with a psalm. And then just ask these 3 questions as you're reading. What is this telling me about God? What is this telling me about myself? What is this asking me to do? It may not always be obvious what each one of those is. But the point is just to take Jesus at his word. When he says in Matthew 6:33, this is also from the Sermon on the Mount, seek first, he says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Tomorrow morning, my 10-year-old is starting school. We start early in Atlanta. So it's over. Summer's over. You guys have a few more weeks, which is awesome. And even if you don't have kids, you still know there's this shift that's happening in the air this time of year. But I know tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to feel like I'm being dropped on a treadmill that's already going. You know what I mean? I gotta feed the dogs and get them outside. I gotta get him packed, and I gotta drive him over there and drop him off. And I gotta I have an early morning meeting. I gotta jump on to whatever it is. We all know it. It's what life feels like. Not for all of us, but for a lot of us. These are ways of reminding ourselves, first thing, what is most important? Who do I belong to? What story am I in? What is most important? In 100 years, what will be the truest thing about me? What will be the truest thing about everyone I know? And that is that we are, in the end, all wrapped up in God's story of our lives. He's doing something. He's making something out of our lives. He's inviting us to participate in that. One of my heroes, a guy named Dallas Willard, was asked before he passed a number of years ago what he does every morning. And he said before his feet hit the floor, before he brushes his teeth, he says the Lord's Prayer slowly, working every word and line into his heart, and the 23rd Psalm every day. It's beautiful. I try to do it. I haven't done it every day. It's not a habit yet. It's a on and off thing. But man, what a way to just kick off your day, to just remember before anything happens, before my phone buzzes for the first time, God is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm not afraid because he's with me. His rod, his staff, they comfort me. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. My cup runs over. He anoints my head with oil. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Just working it in. This is what's most true. This is the energy out of which I will do all things today. This is how I drive on the road. This is how I engage in my first meeting of the day. This is what's true. We got to let God have the first word. Second, one quick thing. I encourage you to try one of these things this week. And I encourage you to tell someone you're doing it. A roommate, a person in your grow group, a spouse, a friend, whomever, a sibling. Hey, I'm gonna try this week. I'm gonna try to do it 5 days this week. Would you just check in at some point and see how it's going? You're just inviting someone in to what you're doing with the Lord. Second thing, a daily rhythm that grounds us in love. I also want to talk about a weekly rhythm that reminds us that we're free. Jesus says in Matthew 11 these words. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke, that is my teaching, my way of life, as you walk in it, is easy, and my burden is light." The way of Jesus, friends, is intended to, engineered to make us less anxious, less fearful, less touchy people, more grounded, more peaceful, more directed, more at peace. This is the gift of Jesus' way to us. And one of the primary ways that the Jewish people and Jesus himself lived into this was through what they called the practice of Sabbath, which I know is probably a foreign word to a number of us in here. Sabbath, it just means to rest, to cease, to stop. It's this idea of putting whatever your work is down so that you can do something better, something more important, something else, something that gives your life, your heart joy. Now, the promise of Sabbath, it was first given to the people of Israel after they left Egypt. So you may know they spent 400 years in slavery in Egypt, building the pyramids, essentially, making straw for Pharaoh's grand architectural vision of the empire. And for 400 years, 7 days a week, these people, their entire life was how many bricks can I make in a day? Because if I make enough bricks, they won't whip me. If I make enough bricks, I'll keep them happy for another day. Their whole life was that, 7 days a week until they died. And coming out of Egypt into this new land that God was calling them, the first gift he gives to them is, I want you to take 1 day a week and I want you to remember you are not the number of bricks you make in a day. You are not how far along you are in your to-do list. You are not how empty your inbox is at this moment because you've checked everything off. You are not how well your kids are doing in school. You are not whether or not you've stuck to your regimen like you set out to do at the beginning of the week. You are not these things. You are my child. You are free. This is what Sabbath is meant to be. 1 day out of 7 in which we just stop all the clamor and we create space for joy, for Thanksgiving. This is what Moses says in the book of Deuteronomy. He says, observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. As the Lord your God commanded you, 6 days you shall labor and do your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord. On it you shall not do any work. Remember, here it is, you were slaves in Egypt. And the Lord your God brought you out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. And therefore the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath. I think it's wonderful to remember that in the 10 Commandments, Sabbath is 4. God put this in front of don't murder people, don't cheat on your wife, don't steal stuff that isn't yours. He's like, yes, that's important. We'll get there, but you've got to know how to rest. And why is that? I don't know, this might be surprising news to you, that God is asking not for you to do more, but for you to do less. Why is that? Because in resting, in stopping, we're training our heart for what is most important, a posture of reception, of remembering that in the end, God has our life. Everything that comes to us is grace. So I can just receive it. I don't have to earn it. I can't earn it. I can just accept it and receive it as love from God to me. So here's what I want you to try to do this week. I know there's always reasons why this doesn't work. And also remember that the people to whom this was given, they weren't people that worked 40-hour work weeks, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. These were shepherds and farmers and parents, and they worked every single day. They didn't get time off. And yet God said, I want you to take a day off. And you're gonna feel like you're falling behind. And you're gonna have people who look down their nose and you're like, well, it must be nice to get so much time off every single day. You just don't answer your emails. It's a gift. God wants to give you a gift. And if you're in here and you're like, I'm a single parent, I work 3 jobs, I'm taking 18 hours this semester, I can't pause, like I understand. This isn't about all the legalism around it. It's about the opportunity for God to give you a gift, which is a space of rest in your life. So here's what I want to challenge you to do. If you can do a whole day, fantastic, that's great. I always kick off all my Sabbaths with waffles or pancakes. That's how we always do it in the Brown house. I think it's a great way to start. But maybe you have like 4 hours you can do, and then you have like a ton of yard work you got to do, and it's not going to be very life-giving. Or you got a bunch of whatever. Maybe you just have a few hours. Just try this week. Set aside 4 hours, a long morning, a lingering afternoon, whatever. Close your computer, put your phone in another room, take off your smartwatch that gets notifications every time someone wants to say something to you. Turn off the TV and then just do something that you love. Like pick up the guitar that's been collecting dust in the corner because you used to have time to play, but now you're so busy, or go for a run. You're like, I don't want to go for a run. Good, that's not your Sabbath. You don't go for a run. Someone else will. Go work in the garden, bake bread, play with your kids, pull out a board game, do something that's going to fill you, and be thankful. That's the gift of Sabbath. Be thankful. Just remember that you're not the number of bricks you make, that God intends for you to have rest because he wants you to remember who really has you, who's holding your life, who's directing your paths, who's leading you into his good purposes. He makes us lie down in green pastures. He leads us beside still waters. He restores our soul. He wants to restore our souls, friends. This is what Jesus offers to every one of us, those of us who call him Lord and those of us who do not yet. Whether you are just checking out God and Jesus and you're not even sure why you're here and why you keep coming back and you like the music and coffee's good, but you're here, Jesus offers to every single one of us the same thing: rest, peace, wholeness, solidness. And so let's just take a minute and we're just going to pray, and we're all going to pray maybe different things. Some of us are just going to accept that gift. Some of us may accept it for the first time. Jesus, we thank you so much. We thank you that you are good. We thank you that you are good and that you offer to us life and peace and joy and wholeness. And that the world that is constantly pulling us in so many directions and driving us into hecticness and franticness and chaos and confusion and divisiveness and fear, and you enter into that fray. You did enter into that fray as a human being, and you said, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And so, Jesus, we ask that you would help us all in our own way, whether for the first time or for the 100th time, accept that gift. We admit, Lord, we confess that there's something about us that we like the busyness and the chaos and all of it. We gravitate towards it. It makes us feel good about ourselves. It makes us feel important. So God, we don't want to do that anymore. We ask that we would receive the gift of your way, your kingdom. We would trust you and walk in your paths, and we would find rest for our souls. And we ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.